Hello students, today we shall be doing chapter 5 Mass Media and History. We shall dwell on Introduction to Mass Media and History of Mass Media. Let us try to conceive of a period in time where there was no means of communication. Technology was not put to use and people resorted to old, primitive, and outdated means of connecting with people. Have you ever imagined how one could send news to Delhi if there was a famine in Bihar in the Mughal period? What strategy or method would be used to convey the message? And most importantly, how much time would it take for help to reach Bihar after the emperor heard the news? It will keep you pondering. It is here that the role of mass media comes in. Mass media is actually a collocation where two words are paired together. It actually means an aggregation of people. Mass means an aggregation of people, whereas media means the varied modes of communication. So mass media is actually a field or an area of mass communication. We can now easily send information to faraway destinations through various medium of communication. But let us imagine how it was done in olden times. We have heard and we have read in history books about a drummer who would carry the emperor's decree, or he would run in the streets beating drums and crying out important news according to the orders or the decrees that were given by the king. And still earlier, you have also heard of runners who were supposed to run all the way with a scroll or with a message so that it would reach on time. And actually, this news would be spread by word of mouth. That is, the general public would be involved in it. Let us focus on the history of mass media. How did the whole concept of mass media evolve? It all began with the invention of the printing press. Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press in 1450. And from then on, printing technology and newspapers were introduced in India once the British regime began. People started receiving printed news, that is through newspapers, and newspapers became the first mass medium of disseminating information and knowledge among the people. And that is how you know that during the British period we have our national leaders coming up with vernacular newspapers and journals so that it would be used to enlighten the masses. So let us focus in depth on newspapers as an important medium of circulating information among the people. Newspapers. What is a newspaper? A newspaper is a publication which mainly prints news, editorials, people's opinions. There may be entertaining or other supplementary content. This you all know for those of you who subscribe to the daily newspaper. You will find the headlines, the main news makers, local, national, international affairs. Then there are editorials, people's opinion. There will be news on entertainment, movies that are being screened, or about teleserials and so on, advertisements. So it is printed and distributed regularly at a definite time. The newspaper reaches your doorstep very early in the morning, and that is followed throughout. Newspapers provide various local, national, and international news. Newspapers are actually historical events which record current events. When historians, as part of their research, required information of a particular period in time, they would access newspapers from the archives that would enable them in the writing of history. But let us examine what method was used before the printed media or the newspapers came into being. So let us learn about the precursors of newspapers. Before the beginning of the Common Era, there was actually a custom in Egypt of placing inscriptions with royal decrees at public places. So, as you know about the Egyptians' style of writing in the form of pictographs or hieroglyphic, so it was customary to have those inscriptions, which we call them a royal decree, where it was inscribed what the king had to convey to the common man, and it was placed in a public place. It was on display at a public place. Emperor Ashoka also resorted to similar method to reach out to his subjects. In the Roman Empire, there were royal decrees which were written on papers, and these were distributed in all regions. So it would be written on a sheet of paper, like in the form of a scroll, it would be distributed. So people were updated with the events or the happenings. They also contained information of various events taking place in the nation as well as its capital. During the reign of Julius Caesar, newspapers were known as acta diurna, meaning acts of every day, which used to be placed at public areas in Rome. Diurna actually means day. Now, it was a very effective way of conveying royal decrees or commands to the people. So, we studied that before newspapers came into vogue, there were decrees with inscriptions in the form of a scroll, which would be kept in a public place so that people could peruse. In England, handouts used to be distributed occasionally, and they gave information about wars or important events. Handouts, you must have seen, it's like a brochure or a pamphlet, you call it. Travelers arriving from distant countries, they would add spice to the stories from these places and narrate it to local people. That is what the travelers did. Okay, so there would be a lot of spice in the form of interesting additions and so on. And the ambassadors of a king who were posted at various places, they would send back important news which had to reach the royal court. Now, the first English newspaper of India was printed on 29th January in the year 1780. And it was actually, the purpose was to keep the people updated, and it was named as Calcutta General Advertiser, or the famous Bengal Gazette. It was started by James Augustus Hickey, who was an Irish gentleman. So the Bengal Gazette was the first ever English newspaper of India. Now, we shall learn about the newspaper called Darpan, which was started in 1832 in Mumbai. Bal Shastri Jambekar, he was the editor of the famous newspaper called Darpan. Now, if you examine the pre-independence era, there were many newspapers that were started by various national leaders, and these newspapers were a medium to enlighten the people about the struggles and the British regime, and also the kind of life, the economic and social life that existed in the pre-independence era. So the news printed in Darpan, it can be reviewed to know about the political, economic, social and cultural events of those times. Students, if you Google it, you will get a lot of information about the newspapers and periodicals that were published or printed during the pre-independence period. There are a few news titles, and let me give you some examples. The accounts of expenditure from the 3 administrative divisions of the East India Company, then the danger of Russian attack on the nation, the appointment of a committee for cleanliness of the city, remarriage of Hindu widows, the inception of the theatre at Calcutta, the achievements of Raja Ram Mohan Roy in England. All these were news which were reported at that time, and it threw light on the various events that took place, that is, the historical events of that period. Another famous newspaper was Prabhakar. This newspaper was started by Bhau Mahajan. The history of French Revolution and the Shatpatre, the letters by Lok Hitawadi, that is Gopal Hari Deshmukh, it aimed at creating social awareness, and all these were published in this newspaper. Shatpatre means 100 letters by Lok Hitawadi, whose real name was Gopal Hari Deshmukh. Dhyanoday. Dhyanoday printed the map of Asia in 1842 and the map of Europe in 1851. And the honor of printing an illustration in an Indian newspaper for the first time goes to Dhyanoday. The news of installation of the telegraph, which was used for electrically transmitting a news, one could see this in the edition of the Dhyanoday. The news of the inception of railways in India, that was also printed in Dhyanoday under the title Chakya Masoba, meaning Masoba with wheels. It has also printed the news of the Indian War of Independence, which is the famous war of 1857, which we call the National Uprising or the Sepoy Mutiny. Newspapers in those times, they were a very important medium of creating social awareness. A newspaper named Indu Prakash, it supported widow remarriage in a very, very, very revolutionary way. Deen Bandhu is yet another famous newspaper representing the masses of Indian society, that is the Bahujan Samaj, and it was started by Mahatma Jyotirao Phule. His mouthpiece was called Deen Bandhu, and it was used to enlighten the masses about how casteism and untouchability is a slur on humanity. Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's very close associate Krishna Rao Balekar, he was also tied up with Deenbandhu. We get to know about the issues relating to the masses through the newspaper. That is how we can gather information about the kind of issues, problems that the masses faced during that period. Now, the history of Indian newspapers before independence is one very important thing that we need to examine. So, students can do one thing. You can make your own scrapbook or a journal with collection of news and their clippings. Let us dwell on Kesari and Maharatna. These two very important newspapers. They were introduced by Lokmanya Tilak, the famous leader, the famous extremist leader. So Kesari and Maharatna were two newspapers and which indicated the important stage that is in the history of Indian newspapers before independence. Gopal Ganesh Agarkar and Bal Gangadhar Tilak, they started these papers in 1881. They spoke about the social and political issues of that period. And Kesari began to publish articles about the nationwide situations, books in the native languages, and the various policies of England. And in the 21st century, newspapers have continued to play a very important role. And it was called the fourth estate or the fourth column or the fourth pillar of democracy. And I would like to tell you, my dear students, that newspapers play a very important role in the democratic setup. Newspapers carry vital information which is disseminated among the masses and it creates awareness. Next, we come to magazines and journals. Magazines and journals are called periodical publications. And in this category, we have publications which are weekly, that is once a week, bi-weekly, that is every fortnight, monthly, once a month, or bi-monthly, twice a month, quarterly, quarterly will be, say, a 3-month period, 6-monthly, or even annual edition. Now, there may be some chronicles which are published. Chronicles means certain accounts, but there is no fixed date, and it's very difficult to find out at what period of time it was written. Now, many newspapers have been introduced, and now there is also this trend of e-newspapers, where you don't have to subscribe to a newspaper which comes to your doorstep, but rather on your cell phone or on your laptop, you can read e-newspapers, and this actually gives you insights into the various happenings in a particular country, or even not only nationally but also internationally. So, the e-newspapers are quite popular with the young readers, and it is easy, convenient, and it can be read at any place, any time as per your inclination and time. Now, Bal Shastri Jambekar, he started the first monthly magazine in Marathi. It was named Digdarshan, and among the periodicals, Pragati. It was now a defunct journal, means not doing very well, which was started in 1929, and it was edited by Trambak Shankar Shejwalkar. and he wrote regularly in this historical context, that is of Maharashtra's history and the various social movements. Now, currently, there are many periodicals devoted to Indian history. Marathi journals such as Bhartiya Itihas, Ani Sanskruti, and Marathwada Itihas Parishad Patrika may be also cited as a newspaper. Now, students, apart from the journals, that were published at that time, there were many more journals which was related to history, and it was published in languages such as Marathi, Hindi, and English by various institutions and universities. You can browse the internet and get information, dear students. Now we come to the electronic media, which you call electronic or digital journalism. We shall now focus on electronic or digital journalism, which is so popular and so much in vogue in present times. There are very, very modern, you can call them ultra modern periodicals, which form a part of electronic or digital journalism. Now, history is a prime subject of interest for these periodicals as well. Many web news portals, social media, web channels, YouTube, etc., they come up with historical content and it's available to the audience readers. And the present day generation, or the youth and the teenagers, they fancy the electronic media for the simple reason it is audio visual. Let us focus on radio as a form of mass media. The IBC, which is the Indian Broadcasting Company, it was a private radio company and it was the first one to broadcast daily programs. Later on, the same company was taken over by the British government and it was named as Indian State Broadcasting Service, ISBS. And on 8 June 1936, it was renamed as All India Radio, AIR, and commonly we call it also Akashwani. After independence, AIR became an integral part of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting in India. Initially, it broadcasted government programs and schemes, and it was named as Akashwani on the suggestion of the famous poet Pandit Narendra Sharma. Now, this is for your general knowledge. During the British rule, the first English news bulletin was broadcasted on 23rd July 1927 from the Mumbai radio station of the Indian Broadcasting Company. Later on, the Kolkata radio station of IBC started a news bulletin in Bengali. Now, Akashwani broadcasts various entertainment and awareness creating and literary programs. It also broadcasts special programs for farmers. That is why you find that in the community welfare centers of villages, farmers assemble at the community welfare center and they listen to these radio broadcasts where these farmers are given certain insights into organic farming, hybrid seeds, irrigation methods, and so on. So it is very, very helpful. So these programs are broadcasted for farmers, workers, the youth, and women. The Vivid Bharati programs, they are also broadcasted in 24 regional languages as well as 146 dialects of Indian languages. As we all know, India is a multilingual country. Lately, various new channels like Radio Mirchi are providing radio services, and Radio Mirchi is very popular with us now. Let's come to television as another important mass media. It was invented by John Logie Baird, and in later years it became an electronic device which was almost indispensable in Indian homes. So, the Delhi Doordarshan Center was inaugurated by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the first Indian president. Doordarshan's Mumbai Center began to telecast its programs on 1st May 1972. Then color television was introduced on 15th August 1982, and that was towards the Asian Games where India had hosted it, and people were very keen on witnessing it through the medium of color television. In 1991, the Indian government granted permission to private national and international channels to telecast in India, and thus it became possible for Indians to watch international events on television, like a cricket match, live cricket matches taking place in different countries, or events taking place in various parts of the globe. And through this was possible through the satellites, INSAT 1A and B, which were the artificial satellites. Now, why do we actually need mass media? We need mass media so that it would facilitate free flow of information to all strata of society. Editorials, various columns and supplements, they are all essential parts of newspapers. Readers are also ensured of a platform so that they can voice their opinions, grievances, which can be redressed through the means of editorials and so on. Newspapers can also help in making democracy stronger. I told you, if democracy has to succeed, then there should be freedom of the press. The newspaper has to be an autonomous body which should not be controlled by any external force. And when there is freedom of press, then we can say that we are truly following democratic principles. Television is an audiovisual medium, and it was possible for this medium to cross all the limitations of newspapers and the radio and show actual live visuals, live recordings, or an event to people. So far, I don't think there is any other alternative to television for watching an event as it is actually happening. Now let us dwell on critical understanding of the information received through mass media. Any information that is received, we have to reason it out. We just cannot blindly accept it, because we have to weigh the pros and cons of a particular decision or a particular policy that has been placed on the table of the parliament. So the news or information in the media, they may not be the actual truth. They may not represent the actual truth. It may be distorted. It may be removed from reality. So we need to scan it very carefully, very meticulously. And there is a very famous event of unauthentic information appearing in a print in Germany. That is, Stern, a German weekly magazine, had purchased a number of so called handwritten diaries of Adolf Hitler. It sold them to various publication companies, and these diaries were verified for their authenticity, and subsequently the news appeared in print to be forged. It became known to the people that we need to be very, very careful about information that is published in the media. Its authenticity has to be proven through verification and the reliability of the sources. Now, what are the opportunities available through mass media? We are talking about career or professional opportunities. Newspapers have to fulfill the task of providing fresh news, current news to its readers. It is also necessary to unfold the background of an event as it is presented in the news. And at such times, newspapers do have to resort to history. And while reporting news in detail, reporters try to compare it with other parallel events which happened in the past. And the past event may be printed in a separate frame. And so we find editorials, columns, news, reviews, articles. And on this day in history, these are all certain important event in history that may get these events in history, they may get newspaper coverage. Now, I would like to speak to you on how the reader gets access to additional information and how we can get better insights about certain current news. Now, newspapers print various columns about certain historical information that appear under, say, a heading, or they come as newsmakers, such as 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and such columns are based on historical documents or written history. And these columns provide historical information about economic, social, political events in the past and also their historical significance. And newspapers do entertain in the form of Sudoku or crossword puzzles based on history, and readers, it elicits the attention of the readers. Now, newspapers occasionally publish some supplements. Earlier, we had these Sunday supplement, which would feature every Sunday, or there would be a fortnightly, that is a weekly, which would be printed every fortnight, or at the end of the year, there would be an annual magazine. So, these were special issues to commemorate a particular occasion. So one needs to review the history. Now, for example, in 2017, 75 years were completed after the announcement of the Quit India movement. You know that the Quit India movement was introduced by Gandhiji in the year 1942. So 75 years were completed in the year 2017. And on such occasions, newspapers highlight the event through various articles, editorials, columns, like what happened in history on this day. So they take us to a flashback, and they do print some photographs which we have never seen before or neither seen in history textbooks. So the knowledge of history is essential when you write history of such types. Now, students, history is also essential in planning radio programs. For example, Akashvani has preserved recordings of all speeches delivered each year by the Prime Ministers of India on 15th August. So when the Prime Minister is called upon to give the historic speech at the Red Fort, we have all these recordings of these eminent Prime Ministers of our country. on the 15th of August. Now, Akashvani also invites historians as experts for discussions on various occasions such as the anniversaries of birth or death of national leaders like Gandhiji's birth or death anniversary and so on. So lectures on the contribution of various national leaders, they also have to be supported by historical information. There are programs like On This Day in History, and they are also an integral part of the daily programs of the Akashvani. Now, television channels also telecast programs based on history. There is an exclusive history channel also. Doordarshan and other television channels, they also help in creating interest in history among people through their historical shows, serials, documentaries, and so on. And the mythological and historical serials like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bharat Ek Khoj, which is based on Panditji's The Discovery of India, and Raja Shiv Chhatrapati, they attracted a very large audience. So while producing this type of programs, maintaining accuracy with regard to presentation of environment, outfits, weaponry, lifestyles, lingual expression, etc., these are all essential, and one should have a deep understanding of the history of that particular period. Now currently there are channels like Discovery Channel, National Geographic, History Channel, etc., which have opened up such a rich treasure of global history for the audience. And it has also enabled people to view the historical and geographical wonders at that time. And it can be viewed at home so conveniently. And to make such programs more entertaining, some parts of the serial are actually enacted by actors. And these are actors who enact the characters of heroic men and women, sportsmen, army chiefs, etc. And these serials about ancient monuments, forts, histories of empires, arts, they're all watched by a very large number of people. And with a lot of interest. So, people with deep knowledge of history in the respective field are sought out in the various fields that we have tried to make it clear to you. Now, let me tell you something interesting. You know, Bharat Ek Khoj, which is based on the discovery of India by Pandit, book written by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. It was directed, the film was directed by Shyam Benegal, which a very reputed filmmaker, and this was telecast on TV in serial form. And the history of India from ancient to the modern period was depicted, and it threw light on social, cultural, and political history of those respective periods. And it also portrayed many aspects of Indian society, civilization, and Indian history, like Harappan civilization, Vedic history, interpretation of Ramayana and Mahabharata, Mauryan period, Turk-Afghan invasion, Mughal period, and the contribution of Mughal emperors, the Bhakti movement, which was undertaken by the saints, the role of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the movements of social reform, and the Indian struggle for independence, etc. And Roshan Seth played the lead role in that serial. He played Panditji's role. He essayed Pandit Nehru's role in the serial, and he also appeared as a narrator, introducing and explaining various parts of the story by even dramatizing them using folklore and informative speeches so that people will be drawn, will take interest. The serial was admired in all parts of India because of its comprehensive historical perspective of Pandit Nehru and its equally comprehensive visual presentation. So, students, we come to the end of the chapter. Let's do a quick recap. Let us see the various units that we covered under chapter 5 with regard to mass media and history, and what aspects of mass media and history did we cover in this video lesson. First of all, we were introduced to the topic, the name or the concept mass media, what it means. Mass means an aggregation of people, and media means the various modes of communication. So you've got the definition right. Then we trace the history of mass media, where we had criers, runners doing their bit, that is, the messengers who were sent by the Mughal emperors to convey to far off places about certain disasters, wars, or events, and which was to be done with a sense of urgency. Then we also learnt about the need for mass media, and more so in a democracy, how mass media plays a very important role in creating awareness and strengthening democracy. It also involves people's participation, where people become proactive and they are aware of their rights and duties, and this keeps them updated with local, national, and international affairs. We also learnt about the need for critical understanding of the information that is received through mass media. You find morphed videos, and you find certain information that is not authentic or it is not genuine, and it can mislead the people. So such news clippings which are seen through what we call through the electronic media, it needs authentication and verification so that people get the real news, the authentic news, and the actual information. We also learnt about the various professional opportunities that are available through the medium of or through mass media. We also learnt about the precursors of newspapers and the various newspapers like the Bengal Gazette, Darpan, Prabhakar, Dhyanodaya, Kesari, Maratha, and so on. And from then on, the evolution into magazines and journals, some of them which were weeklies, bi-monthlies, quarterly, as well as annual bulletins. And we also learnt about how electronic or digital journalism has caught up with the people and how they prefer it for the simple reason it's convenient, it is easy, and there is a lot of flexibility with regard to getting access to the news that is obtained through electronic or digital journalism, which we call electronic media. Then, my dear students, we also learnt about why these newspapers are also used by historians to obtain information, and whenever we celebrate an anniversary of a particular event in history or of a famous personality, Then, how the newspapers play a very important role in procuring the information of a bygone era. Now, students, I know you have maintained a history notebook. There are some objectives in the form of fill in the blanks, identify the wrong pair, choose the right alternative, writing of brief notes, and giving historical reasons. Now, the objective oriented questions, you may try doing it on your own, whereas the elaborate questions, when I talk about, say, short notes and explaining, giving historical reasons, these need to be actually understood and done on your own. And as I told you, you are maintaining a notebook where you can write the long answers. And as part of your homework, I want you to write the short notes, which is on page number 37 of your textbook. The 3 short notes. Explain the following sentence with reasons, 3 answers there. And question number 4 on page number 38, which is answer the following questions in 25 to 30 words. 2 very important questions. Explain the objectives of newspapers and how is history helpful in planning of Akashvani programs. And after that, you may attempt question number 5. Please do not write the passage in your notebook, that is the passage on radio. Rather, there is a table. Above the table, you can see 4 questions. Answer those questions, and you may complete the concept chart, which is on newspapers, radio, and television. I hope you have comprehended this chapter.